where both hands play unison equally together. And I'll give you all day to figure that out because there is not a single drum rudiment that has a unison in it. Well, let's see if this shows up in your body. My hypothesis is that most drummers, when we learn rudiments and we spend all this time alternating and flamming, we are imprinting dysregulation into our nervous system.
What is up, everybody? Welcome back to the Drum Show podcast. This podcast today, I'm really excited about. This is a guest that I have been going back and forth with for quite a while now, trying to line up a time where we could have an in-depth conversation. And so welcome our guest today, Adam Gust, who is an incredible drummer as well as a clinician and I want to say talker, but that is not what you are.
I do talk.
I do talk some. So, and we are going to be discussing, I think it's going to be a fun, wide-ranging conversation, I think. And so, Adam, tell us a little bit about what you do. And I mean, I could do it, but I think you would do a better job. I know that a lot of your work has been around the vagus nerve and how that integrates into our practice time and our drumming. I know you've got a great story. And so maybe you can just dive in and we can start there instead of me trying to do that for you. I think you'll do a better job of it.
Okay, cool. Yeah. Well, first, thank you for having me on your podcast. I remember you did a story about anxiety a while ago, and that really made me think, wow, Stephen has such a breadth of being able to be compassionate about sensitive emotional issues and still have fun as a drummer and talk about neuroscience with Mark DiCiani. And so I really was looking forward to this conversation with you. I am a drummer first. And so I have been studying a lot of science about neurology and about the vagus nerve and somatics, which is somatic means of the body. But I've always been a drummer first. And so I've never really wanted to take an academic route with it because I felt like, man, if I dive into academia, like I'm going to kind of have to deprioritize my playing. And I always wanted the drumming to be the focus of what I'm doing. So the more I've gotten into this, the more I've noticed there's really this black hole in drum education, and I feel the drumming world, about this somatic approach to how we play our instrument, how sensory information from the body plays a role in skill acquisition in motor movement. And I really am looking forward to being able to talk about that with you.
I totally agree. And I've told several, close friends that, whenever there are some things that especially when you're teaching or maybe you're out working, there's some things you talk about with colleagues and some things you talk about with students. And then there's some things that you ruminate for a very long time with yourself and close friends until you can get a better understanding of it for yourself, if you will, and I've been doing that for quite a long time with teaching and drumming specifically. Of course, we homeschool our 3 kids. My wife,
wow.
I say we, but my wife has homeschooled our kids since, my 16-year-old was in, I think first grade, and now we have 3. And so she was a teacher before that. So she and I talk a lot about teaching. We observe our children a lot while they're learning. We observe their different personalities, and we try to make that a better experience for them. Mm-hmm. And one of the things that I have noticed is I don't love the way that the drums have been historically taught in a more legitimate or collegiate atmosphere. That's what Mark DiCiani and I spend a lot of time talking about. If you want to look up episodes with him, we have multiple episodes with Mark DiCiani, incredible drummer out of Philadelphia, was the dean of the School of the Arts at the Philadelphia, in Philadelphia. And so, but it's taken me a very, very long time to understand and wrap my head around why I don't agree with several of the components of how the drums are taught, and that type of a thing. One of the more interesting things, maybe we can launch into a discussion, is we've been recently doing drum camps. We started those about 2 years ago. We just concluded our 8th one this past Friday, and each year has been sold out. And which has been great. We take 12 drummers at a time, and we go from Sunday night until Friday night, and it's drums, lots of drums. And we just opened registration for 2024. If anybody's interested, those links will be in the show notes. But what I've noticed with drummers, not only in the camps, but I spend an inordinate amount of time talking about what I call the externals of drumming. So the things, everybody wants a magic exercise. And I'm telling them, like, I can give you any exercise. You can write an exercise. The exercise is not the magic, the system we put ourselves through. And then right outside of that, the system we've set up around our practice time and how we're managing things outside of our practice, our emotional, our physical, our mental states, has a huge effect on how we're able to proceed with drumming. And we see it a lot in the drum camps that we come to, or that we do here. And some people come in carrying no baggage. Some people come in carrying a lot of baggage because of where they are in life. Maybe they're going through a marriage issue. Maybe they just lost a parent. They got kids at home. Maybe they got chronic pain, struggles at work. Maybe they're a serial business entrepreneur and they've got, and what I find is when they stop for a week and just focus on the drums, all of a sudden all this stuff surfaces.
Yeah.
And now we're not just dealing with drums, we're dealing with some life around drums. I don't want to make these sound like there's some kind of, we go in the woods and, make tents and be, it's not that experience. But I have found as a teacher, if I can't get them past that, we can't really go very far with the drums. If I can't get them over those hurdles of whatever that is that may be bubbling up, whether that be confidence issues, whether that be their life's a mess issues, we all have messy lives, that really affects how they're learning the drums. We had a really good example of this a couple weeks ago. And this was a simple example. I had noticed one of the students when we were playing, because we have group time, we have one-on-one time, we have individual practice times. I'd noticed that when we were playing these warm-up songs, she was killing it. I mean, she was really playing them well. She just felt relaxed, but there was a specific style that happened in.
Yeah.
And then I noticed the song she was preparing for our Friday recording session there was this tension. You could see it in her body. The notes were just as easy, but she wasn't connecting with that music for whatever reason. So when we got in the recording session, she recorded her song and I came in, I said, I'm going to call an audible on you. I just want you to play along to this song. Don't worry about getting it right. Just play along to this song. I saw something this week and I just want to look at it. Okay. And so I started playing a song we had played in warm-ups and I came on the talk back. I said, just jump in anywhere and start playing. Her whole body changed. How she sat at the drums. I mean, all of a sudden she was in the music and it just kind of an example of getting a person, like, you're not swimming well in this water. Let's put you in this water where you're more comfortable. This music resonates with you internally for whatever reason. And all of a sudden, I didn't have to teach a thing.
Yeah.
It started happening. So I kind of use this as a launching point because I know this intersects a lot with kind of your area of expertise in getting out of the way of ourselves from an emotional, the different components within the body and how that can happen. So let's use that as a random launching point.
No, that is not random at all. That is on the money with this context of how we kind of cognitively think about ourselves as drummers, the sort of conscious context of what we're doing, and then this subconscious context, which is really the sensory information coming up from the body to the brain. And I guess one premise that I'd like to establish right away, because I have gotten a lot of pushback when I talk about this, is there are two intuitions going on. There is our conscious intuition in our brain, which can rationalize and deduce and do all these amazing cognitive things. And so there's this wisdom that's going on in the brain. And there's also this wisdom that's going on in the body. We have reflexes, we have decisions being made in our body for us. And in fact, some studies suggest that as many as 11 million inputs from the body are coming to the brain in 1 second. And the prefrontal cortex, the more conscious brain, can only handle like 10 to 60 per second. So we have to be very judicious in the brain about how we handle this flood of sensory information. And so just first, like this context, okay, there's stuff that makes sense to the body and there's stuff that makes sense to the brain, and they're not always in unison. They're not always in harmony. What we think is truth and what we feel is truth. And so, yeah, so I want to focus more on this sensory information, the truth that the body is speaking, because I think it's really been for about 400 years, it's been downplayed ever since Rene Descartes said, I think, therefore I am. In his Meditations Manifesto, he suggested that the brain is the great human proprietor and the body is basically this meat wagon that follows along with whatever the brain is thinking. And this is filtered into philosophy and psychology and education, politics, and all of Western civilization for hundreds of years. And really in the last 30 years, I would say, especially with the advent of functional magnetic resonance imaging, like this technology that we have to analyze how neural transmissions happen between the brain and the body, we've really started noticing how backwards this is and how the body actually is first to respond in a lot of ways before we can even come online with our conscious mind.
You know, an interesting thing, and I know a lot of you are going to be like, we're talking about a lot of things that aren't drumming. That's what I try to tell people. I'm like, it is all drumming. We cannot separate. I'm sorry, I can't separate your drums from your marriage. I can't separate it from your firstborn. I can't separate it from your job.
From your body.
Yeah, the body is involved with all these things.
Yeah.
And the body carries stress from these other things and worries and concerns and reactions. And it really does intersect with our drumming. And an example of this I went through years ago. I had chronic back pain for a very, very long time. And I mean, I went to surgeons, I went to PT, you name it, I was doing it until I started reading about the mind-body connection with pain and the fight or flight syndrome. And the more I read into that, it was a specific doctor that used to specialize it. He had like a 75% success rate with his clients. And he started with the mental aspect of it. He started with, what are you worried about? What are you anxious about? What are you angry about? And the more I started diving into that, the more I figured out that my back pain, everybody's pain is different. It was really triggered by stress, by anxiety, anger. So a lot of times, this week, I started the week, I mean, everything down the back of my back was tight. Everything, and I'm stretching and the first thing I go to now is, okay, am I stressed about something? What am I stressed about? Am I angry at somebody that maybe I don't know I'm angry at them? And sorting through that, the back pain goes away, And so it's a very interesting intersection of the body having a response to what's going on with the other, nervous systems. And intellectually, I couldn't even figure out that I was angry at someone. But my body was like, yeah, we're mad at that person. And it's like, decided that it's going to be my right shoulder that hurts. And then I figure it out, and all of a sudden I wake up and I'm not hurting anymore, And so it's been an interesting journey with that kind of, I think, connects back to this.
Yeah, you're talking about biopsychosocial science. It's this idea that there are these three spheres. There's the body, the mind, and what's going on outside of us. And all these things used to be separate. They used to be sociology, psychology, and biology, and neurology, all these siloed things. But it's much more becoming apparent that we need to integrate how all these work together, more in systems theory. That I definitely want to talk about a doctoral dissertation by Dr. Anna Ditari, which talks about this. It's recent, but I say all this, and I mean, this is a drum podcast. Let's bring it to like, what the heck does this have to do with drumming?
That was my next thing. I was like, so how does this intersect with our drumming or learning?
Yeah, I just need to set this up because there's an exercise I've gone through in some workshops and some membership organizations. This is the first public kind of exhibition of this idea I want to get across, and I've gotten some emotional pushback on it. And so that's why I wanted to say the piece I did earlier. So there's this way that our nervous system learns, and this is universal for all of us. I have yet to find anyone who doesn't understand what this exercise symbolizes. So this is we're gonna look at kind of brain lateralization, which is how the left and right brain work together and how that relates to our left and right hands as drummers. So I'd like to first, let's go start with one. So we'll put one in each hand, and this is gonna be bilateral coordination. So this is first finger up in each hand, and then we switch to 5 in each hand. And so we go back and forth between 1 and 5. And so, okay, that makes sense. This is bilateral, both sides of the brain working together, sending messages to both sides of the body, and we go back and forth. Okay, that's simple enough. Now, if you put 1 in just one of your hands and 5 in the other, now switch back and forth. And so this is contralateral. Yeah, this is the idea. And this has nothing to do with how good of a drummer you are. This is just indicating, putting this point across, that how our body learns, a somatic learning, that how our body functions, it should be represented in our drummer system. So that's the 1 and the 5. Now we're going to get a little more challenging. So we're going to do the peace sign, which is first and third finger. And we're going to switch to 3, which is going to be the A-OK sign, like that. Yeah, cool. And now the nuance for this is to keep this middle finger up. Really focus, don't even focus as much on whether you're doing a 2 or a 3, but really focus on that middle finger, kind of nuance this shift and try to keep that up. This works on finger individuation. You're using some of pieces of your neocortex to do this, because the fingers are very involved in the human brain, this top of the brain, the neocortex. And so now this is the challenge stage. We're going to put 2 in one hand and 3 in the other. I'm going to go back and forth from 2 to 3. Yo, Stephen, killing it. Nicely done. This is hard.
Yeah, well, my brain's about to blow up. You see smoke coming out.
So this is great. So the basic premise of this is it's easier to start bilateral, both sides together, and then we nuance it. And then the third step is to switch to go cross-lateral or contralateral. So there's one more that's a little more percussive. You can do the Spock, live long and prosper, and then
man,
switch.
when I was a kid and I finally could do this, man, I really thought I'd done something.
You are. You're Vulcan. You have Vulcan mind meld going on here. So now you can switch to these 2 middle fingers coming together and touching. And this is the hardest one of these 3. And go back and forth. And the nuance of this is holding first and pinky fingers stationary and only moving these 2 fingers. And that's hard. It's a challenge.
It's very hard, especially my left hand. My pinky wants to.
Yeah. This is great for that. And I also like the contact. There's like a percussive thing going on when the fingers touch. And now the trick is put 2 in one hand together and now switch back and forth.
You're really being kind of a jerk here.
I don't know.
I'm kidding. I'm joking.
We all know you play
here.
great. We all know you have well deserved the community that you built. I mean,
let's see here.
Oh yeah,
no,
I
meant that as a joke. Let's see here. Let's see if I can even do this. Hold on. Okay.
Yeah, there it is.
No, it's not there.
Yeah, it is.
This is hard. Okay, there it is.
Yeah,
and this is hard. Okay, I got it.
Yeah, and so first
like
you would start here and make sure you have that. And it's cool to do it in time. You can feel like a little bit of percussion happening between the fingers. And so even if you're listening to a song you like and you just kind of want to do that, and then you switch to going back and forth the other way. And so what have we established here? Whether the body, a somatic perspective of skill acquisition, likes when both sides of the body work in unison. We sort out what kind of neural transmissions need to happen for that to work, and then we go to cross-lateral. Okay, well now that we've got feel like I've established that. So now the next level is, okay, well how does this show up in our drumming systems? So let's look at drum rudiments. So pick a rudiment that's your favorite, where both hands play unison equally together. And I'll give you all day to figure that out, because there is not a single drum rudiment that has a unison in it. And so again, we have these 2 intuitions going on from this cognitive intuition. We can look at the 40 drum rudiments and think, okay, these are brilliant. All these great drummers have used these in their lives to become great. But from a somatic perspective, it is contrary to how our body learns. And so, okay, well, I've gotten a lot of folks that have said, how come no one's spoken about this? How come all these great drummers reference rudiments? And so then the next step is, well, let's see if this shows up in your body. So my theory, my hypothesis is that most drummers, when we learn rudiments and we spend all this time alternating and flamming, we are imprinting dysregulation into our nervous system. And what I mean by dysregulation is when we intend to do something, we aren't able to do it.
Got something really exciting to tell you. I'm pumped about it. These are so much fun for me and for the people that attend. So registration for the 2024 SDS camp season is open now. Now last year these sold out. I sent out a couple of emails and in 2 weeks they were completely sold out, waiting list only. Jump to the link in the video description. All of the information is at the link below. Do not wait around. Hopefully I'll see you here at the SDS studios in 2024.
So let's say I intend to do a unison. Okay, I'm doing a unison right now. Okay, that's my intention. Great. Now I intend to flam. Okay, now I intend to do a 6 millisecond flam, 10 millisecond flam, 20 millisecond flam. Okay, those are my intentions. But what happens if I intend to do a unison and it comes out as a flam? That's a dysregulation. But like you think of Steve Gadd, when that guy plays a unison, it's one sound. It is, but he's also a rudimental drummer. He's practiced a lot of rudiments. So that's a person that comes up a lot in this conversation. Well, Steve Gadd plays rudiments, he plays flams. So there's an exercise I'd like people to try. So instead of doing alternating flam taps, do this alternating, but make it a unison. And now this somatic unison idea that I have is play every rudiment that there is, but play them as unison. So first alternating, doubles, paradiddles, and so make sure they're unisons. And so many great drummers I've showed this to, they flam. And they're like, well, what's going on? Why am I trying to play a unison and it comes out as a flam? You move it around the drum set, you intend to play a unison, and it comes out as a flam. That's a dysregulation in our nervous system. And I feel like our drumming system of rudiments is largely to blame for a lot of us that have this somatic dysregulation.
Yeah, rudiments. So this is an interesting conversation for me. And we're about to knock some sacred cows. So please, everyone, if you came up on the rudiments, just drink a cup of coffee. We're all right. We can have the discussion. So I came up under Dr. John Wooten, who is a rudimental genius. I took from one of Alan Dawson's former students who, Alan Dawson's got the infamous rudimental ritual and so well-versed in the rudiments. But over the years, I'm not, I've become more and more uncertain that is the place I need to start students when it comes to drum set, because they came about before the drum set. And a lot of them don't translate as well to the drum set. They are some interesting ideas, and I believe eventually we should learn them. But I do not start my students with the rudiments. I think the rudimentary applications of the drum set are different than a snare drum. So if you're in marching band, you should learn your rudiments. But if you're playing drum set and that's what you want to do, it's not going to be the first place that I start you. I'm going to start you with some more things that we natively do on the drum set that have much more to do with unisons, although obviously I'm not thinking of it in the depth and the way that you are. It just seemed a better way that I'm not using a lot of these skills immediately. I think we need to learn some other things first. So I'm actually with you that I'm not certain the rudiments are the best way to begin playing the drum set. And, people will say bad things, especially, the drumming community, they're entrenched. And I think they are very useful. But at the same right, I think that if we know singles, doubles, and unisons, we can go a very, very long way before we ever have to start learning rudiments on the drum set. I think the rudiments of the drum set are actually different than the rudiments for a snare drum. But that's a topic I haven't quite thought through completely. So I still wrestle late at night with that one.
Yeah. So I like to start with what you're saying is absolutely right. I feel like, I love rudiments. I just have a feeling that before we really ingrain unison in our body, the rudiments can actually be detrimental to our progress. And so there's one unison that I think a lot of us miss as drummers, and that's just this idea of what happened in a clap. Like most of us clap this way, but I would say if we're working on symmetry and we're trying to get this unison on both sides of the body, let's first just doing a clap from the wrist and being able to do that with a metronome, and then clap from the elbows, and then clap from the shoulders like the monkey with the cymbals. Like these 3 levels, I feel like if you can do a unison clap with hands kind of right on the midline, separating us like this with a metronome, okay, that's an indication that first, both sides of my body are working together. And it's a great way to sort of suss out any inconsistencies that might happen. And this is a big part of somatic work, is finding out what asymmetries happen in the body. Because that is, if there's some sort of tension, or if there's some kind of weakness happening on either side, there's always a compensatory reaction on the other side of the body. So any minutia that happens on one side is automatically doubled on the other. And then we're left trying to contend with this dysregulation that's built into us when we go to this highly asymmetrical instrument that is the drum set. So that's why it's so effective to find these little minutia that are holding us back from being in unison. And so you mentioned, like, what is a drum set rudiment then? What is sort of this foundational aspect of drum set? And I think the hi-hat is a really underutilized tool to suss out our unisons. So there's a 3-way unison that I like to do if I sit on, especially if I sit on a kit that I've never played, and I'm like, okay, I have to figure out how to regulate myself to this new whole series of complications. And one of them is this instrument. So I'll try to play it quiet, but so just 2 hands together and left foot in 8th notes. That's okay. Those are all unisons. Okay, let's focusing on being able to do that as sort of base level, I feel. Now incorporating the right foot in quarter notes. And still making sure these are all unisons. Now taking either the right hand or left hand over and bringing it to the snare. Is my volume okay? Am I distorting?
No, you're
okay.
good.
Okay, so now we have all these unisons going on here. We have this unison between the feet and quarter notes, and now we're having to play unison between the snare and the kick drum. And this, for some, like especially beginners, you might be hearing, well, we're hitting kind of that kind of sound here, or you might get a flam there. So then the next level is alternating between left and right on the snare. And then moving this around the drums and still making sure you're planting those unisons, feeling it. This is how we embody the instrument to me. If you can play a unison and you feel like kind of these sound waves are all meeting together, you're essentially embodying your intention through the instrument in the unison. I feel the unisons are so important for this. And now this next level, this is the one that tends to trip people up, is now moving those 8th notes to the upbeat, and that makes them be upbeat 16th notes. So instead of that, it becomes, so for an alternating sticking, let's put the left hand on the hi-hat and right hand on the snare. And then alternate. For those on the podcast, I'm now doing left hand lead with 8th notes on the snare in the left and upbeat 16th notes in the right. And the goal is to really lock in those unisons. And then from here, now I will start trying to play your favorite beat. Up, forward. Making sure that all these unisons line up. And so before I feel like anyone should be working on their flam taps and such, like making sure that unisons with the hi-hat, being able to move alternating sticking in unisons and the hands are on the drums and making sure all those unisons line up with kick drum, and then bringing that to whatever beats you like to play. Play the beat the way you would normally play it. And then I call it chaperoning. You're sort of putting this chaperone on one of the hands, like you have a bunch of kids going into the museum and you don't want them to knock over the Tyrannosaurus Rex skeleton. So you want them to have fun, but you don't want them to go and, mess up the place. And so I feel like incorporating these special attention to unisons is a way to do that.
Yeah, and I think so much of our practice time and our playing, we get in our own way, and we kind of ignore some of the things that I think our body is telling us or some of the natural inclinations because, oh, we need to run this exercise, or we need to do this, or we need to do that. And somewhere in that whole learning, we forget and we kind of start ignoring our body and what it's telling us is natural or what we can do. I mean, every person I've ever known can dance to music. They can move in time to music. And really, that's no different than what we're doing on the drums. It's how do we translate that? You know, if I put, I got a 6-year-old daughter, and if I put on a song, she immediately is dancing around, right? And how do I translate that to an instrument? How do I translate that easily to an instrument? Because she's naturally got rhythm. It's a matter of how do we translate that to where she's not getting in her way when she's playing. And there's some players that are better at that, and they call them naturals, and there are some players that are not as good at that. And I think I spend a lot more time with those students on the mental side of kind of exercises to get out of their way, kind of the exercise you were just giving us, which is essentially let's get in line with what the body wants to naturally do, how it wants to naturally learn. And then once we start cooperating with that, learning is actually a lot easier. Once we'll give ourselves the grace to do that. But it really takes keeping a beginner's mindset and paying attention to what your body is telling you, I think.
Yeah. These are exercises that help with coordination, and that's great. But really, the deeper aspect of this is what you're talking about. This kind of using these as tools to suss out what's going on here. Because so much of what we do as drummers is asymmetrical. We lose focus on how important it is to have this symmetry between both sides of the body, the hands and the feet. And so all these exercises, the exercise is not the most important thing. It's actually recognizing what's happening in your body. These are just tools of sussing out asymmetry, and then ultimately really figuring out what emotional state are they conjuring. So there's a big one, and that's heels on the floor. I know there's a lot of kind of arguments and raise people's kind of emotional state when you talk about whether it should be heel up or heel down. But the fact is that when our heels are on the ground, we are more grounded. We are more emotionally stable. Because, I mean, you mentioned fight or flight earlier. This is actually a flight response. Heels up. For hundreds of thousands of years, when humans' heels come up, it's because they're ready to run from a threat. And so also, and fight response, when we go to fist, we're ready to fight the threat that's in front of us. And that's why finger control is such an important aspect of somatics, because actually the neocortex is what controls finger individuation. And so in order to have finger control, we have to be able to have access to our neocortex. You may have heard of lizard brain. It was coined by Carl Sagan in 2000. And the idea is that when we get a threat response, we regress to these earlier, more primitive adaptations of the brain. So the human brain is the neocortex. It's on the outside. It's conscious thought. Mammalian brain is the limbic midbrain that understands sensory information. And then the brain stem is lizard brain. That's just like holding it together, like keeping us breathing, keeping our heart beating. And so this idea, it comes from Dr. Walter Hess in the 1940s. He came up with this idea of dissolution, that has our brain kind of regresses down to this lizard brain when we're under threat. And there's definitely corollaries in our somatics. When we only have access to the lizard brain, we only have access to what lizards do, which is they don't have finger individuation. Their whole hand clamps up. They don't have coordination. They pretty much only move this way. And that's what happens to us as drummers. When we're removed from social engagement, ventral vagal is what the polyvagal theory calls it, this social engagement level of access to the neocortex. And we can use biological markers to make sure finger control is one of those. And so though you'll see drummers play this way, this is very much lizard brain. You only need your lizard brain to play drums this way, but you need your neocortex to play this way. And that's why going from open to closed is so great, because you know that you have the power of this kind of reptilian aspect of our vagus nerve and our physiology, and you also have access to this kind of more human, more hyper-developed, evolved part. So that's why I really like playing open and closed as much as possible, because you have the crouching tiger and the hidden dragon, I like to call it. Yeah, you don't get stuck in one of them, because so many drummers get stuck here, and then you start to lose coordination, because lizards don't have coordination that mammals do, and humans have this special haptic coordination. It's called the use of tools. And so when, in terms of haptics, extended proprioception, our emotional state is found that it actually goes to the end of the tool we're using. So the minute these sticks start flying around, we're automatically tuning our emotional state to the end of the stick. And so we need
that's an interesting thing I read not long ago. Was they were studying professionals in different fields and the tools that they used. And what they were finding, I wish I could remember the study. What they were finding was, just as you said, the drumstick was no longer a stick. Once the stick was in their hand and they were well versed with it, the stick was an extension of the arm. And they could do things just as sensitively with the tip of the stick or a hammer or whatever that tool may be, a surgeon, as they could the tip of their finger. It was that intuitive to how the brain starts thinking of that as, oh no, that's no longer separate. That is part of us. That the stick is now part of the arm, and we're just utilizing that to extend our, our physical abilities.
Exactly.
So it's very interesting how the brain and the emotional side begin to work with that.
Yeah, and so how we can use that is to think of, okay, we have a ball and socket joint here. We have a ball and socket joint here in the shoulder, and then the elbow, and then the wrist. And then we need to start thinking, instead of German, French, and American grip, we need to start thinking of this as a ball and socket joint. And so in terms of learning technique, I like to think of the globe. Like, imagine you have a globe in front of you and you cut it in half. So you have these two globes out this way. In the right-hand globe, try to put the longitude lines and just try to flip the stick around and have it cover the whole span of the globe. And so I feel like, obviously this takes a lot of work to be able to work this way, but this is how to work on our haptics, our extended proprioception, our understanding of embodying this as though it is a whole nother length of our arm. And I feel like really hyper-focusing and reducing technique down to German, French, and American, I mean, those are just points on the globe, really understanding the full breadth of our movement. And this way we can have all this emotional activity in the end of the stick, but we're not moving that much. We're keeping composed here in an actual movement of our hand. And so that's how this science and drum technique overlap, I think.
And I think it's an important point to make, as we talk about this, that, neither is better or worse. I think we were made as individuals to balance this out. So not let the conscious mind block out too much of this very intuitive part of our body. But then also don't let this become too much, because we have both for a reason. Yeah. I knew the first time I saw my wife that there was some connection there. I knew it was when I was 15. And from the minute we started dating, I was ready to marry. I was done, Why did my body know that? Automatically it shot it through. Why do you go into a situation and automatically you think, okay, this is something weird about this situation? We didn't think that. So then we can take our rational mind and go, okay, let's assess our surroundings. What's going on here? Why am I not feeling safe? Or whatever that may be. We can have an intuition with our spouse, and then we can use, our logical brain to work through that and effectively connect those emotional sides with that very thought-driven side. So I think the two need to play very, very well together. And in music, let's give some music examples. This is about music. I call myself a musician, and drums is the way that I get to interact with music. That's how that is. If the drums went away tomorrow, I am a musician. I would like to find another way to interact with other musicians, so I would find another instrument immediately and start doing that, right? But Charles Ives, great 20th century composer, way ahead of his time. Theorists didn't know what he was doing. It was classed as noise. And he actually got very, very frustrated. Of course, go read his story. I'm giving you the Cliff Notes version. And he got very frustrated, went into another field altogether. I believe he was responsible for coming up with how they rate the risk within the insurance industry. I believe he was one of the founding fathers of that. But he essentially just got frustrated, went away from music, and wound up, if I remember correctly, taking his entire catalog and leaving it by the dumpster outside of some museum. And one of the workers found it and realized what it was. 20 years later, they're calling him the father of 20th century harmony because of what he was doing. How does that affect this? He knew when he heard it that it made sense. He couldn't think through and tell you theoretically why all of that made sense. We hadn't gone far enough in the theory. But later, theorists came behind and said, okay, so it definitely sounds like it rubs, but this is why it works. This is why it works. He could hear it. He was listening more to me with the side of the body that we're talking about, with that intuitive side, with what the body was telling him. No, that melody is correct. It does work with this. It does. Whereas theorists are very much the other side. Well, the rules have to, we have to logically be able to. And I think it takes both sides. I think the best players are able to balance both sides of that.
Yeah. Yeah, I guess I'm probably sounding quite theoretical in this interview.
I think we have to bring it down to a theory of, which is funny because it's something that we're all born with. And if you watch kids, children pay attention to their insides much more than they do their outsides. Mm-hmm. And oftentimes, if we will pay attention to the cues they're giving us, they're cues of their internal, what's going on internally. And the way they learn is very interesting as well. It's a very intuitive way if you can kind of get in line with how children work. They're actually very sympathetic, emotional, very, we just have to learn how to decipher what they're feeling, right? But I think that we have to get a little technical to explain to people like, no, this is why it matters. This is why this affects your playing. This is why if we can get out of our way, we become a better player. Mm-hmm. So I think it's a very important conversation to have. And I think it's very important to have teachers like yourself that are focusing on it and coming up with ways to help us connect those parts of our bodies. Like here's the nerdy part of it. This is what's going on. Okay, here's a simple exercise that helps you do that. And by doing that, it's like, oh, okay, yeah, I feel that. Okay, I get it. I understand what you're saying. Right?
Yeah, I've definitely opted for the nerdy because there very easily goes into the spiritual direction. So many cultures who focus on the body, they're dismissed as woo-woo, new agey, whatever. And I just like, okay, I see how that isn't going to land with people. So I'd rather be accused of being too nerdy. And actually but up until this point, haven't had a whole lot of solid scientific research to support what I'm doing. But why I said the timing of this conversation is so good is because there was a recent doctoral dissertation by Dr. Anna Ditari in the Royal College of Music in London. And she applied these biopsychosocial research tools to music education. And she's finding this emotional underpinning of tension and how we learn and how somatics affect our thought and performance. It's mind-blowingly good. and I'm super excited to talk to her on Friday. We've noticed so many overlaps in what we're talking about, and her model of music education is one that I ascribe to, and it shows a lot of scientific support for somatic work.
And we can go into I want to respect your time. We'll need to wrap it up. But I want to go in, this also goes into how they're using music therapy now, especially in hospitals with traumatic injuries. I think there was a senator a few years ago that was shot, I believe, in the head. And I believe it was a lady that was working with them, used music to help them learn to walk again. They used the rhythm of the body to try to get things moving. So in other words, those things that we're not thinking about, can we make the body function? And, they're not supposed to walk again and they're up walking, right? How does that happen? That stuff happens not with us thinking about it. It happens with us getting out of the way and going, hey, yes, we have thought, yes, we're able to do that, but there's this huge spiritual soul to every individual that makes them unique. And if we can't tap into that, if we're always surface thinking about the exercises and this and that, we can't tap into that.
This podcast is brought to you by the Drum Better Daily program. That's actually my online drum school that I've run now for 12 plus years. Not only have I been playing the drums professionally since the age of 15, I've been teaching since the age of 18. Matter of fact, I talked to one of my, my first student a few days ago. I actually called him to see if he could sub a gig out for me. Daniel, love you, man. And he's still playing. He's still doing it on a pro level. I would love to have you go check it out at stevensdrumshed.com. You can find a link to that in the show notes or video description, whichever platform you're watching it on. But it truly is a community of like-minded drummers where we are striving to just be the best that we can be at the drums. In addition to over 70 pre-recorded drum courses, there's also a tech talk area where we talk about everything technology related as it pertains to the drums, e-kits, recording, doing videos, all of that stuff. There are forums where you can hang out with the other students as well. We do 2 live video student calls every week that you can join if you'd like to. We do guest artist calls monthly, and I'll even make you a personalized lesson plan if that's what you need. Yes, we talk about the nuts and bolts of drumming. Yes, I give you exercises, but we also talk a lot about how to practice more efficiently, how to practice better, and how to get more out of your practice time. I know you're just like me. You're busy, you're being pulled by work, by family, by friends, by other responsibilities. Whenever you practice, you really want to see gains and have it be productive. That is what we focus on in the Drum Better Daily program. I'll have to say personally, it's been really cool because some of these students I've worked with for over 12 years, we started running drum camps last year in 2022, and I got to meet some of them in person for the first time. Those drum camps have been selling out. They've been just blowing my mind with how much fun they are and how great a time it is to bring the community together in person. A community that was started online and has been going online strong now for over 12 years. I'd love to have you be a part of it.
I had a student come in, or I had a drummer come in for a one-off lesson years ago. They graduated college, excellent player. They said, I just kind of wanted you to give me an overview of kind of where you feel I am. So they sat down and they played this song they'd prepared with the sheet music. It was very collegiate, right? There's a sheet music, here's a song. They hit every note, and I said, you played that song great. And they said, do you have any thoughts? And I said, I still don't know what you sound like. And they said, well, did I miss something on the page? I said, no, excellent reader, and you're an excellent player. You pulled all of it off just as you wanted to. I said, but I don't know what you sound like. I don't know what you sound like playing that song. You've been so head heavy with thinking through all these things that you haven't taken a second and hit that spiritual component, the soul of the human, and how does that interact with all this knowledge we're getting here? And I think the greatest players, this is my theory, unofficial theory, the greatest players are the ones who are able to put those together. The reason Steve Gadd resonates with people, we mentioned him earlier, the reason Elvin Jones, the reason all the Steves, Steve Smith is a little bit more on the technical side.
Steve Jordan.
And Steve Jordan, the Steves. Look, you always got to have the Steves in the conversation. Tony Williams, who at a very early age was touring with the 19, 17 maybe, was touring with these jazz heavies. What was the difference? Elvin Jones, go watch him play. He was a force of nature. It wasn't just notes to him. It was Elvin just pouring all over the drum. Literally, he sweated so much. He was just pouring himself out on the drums because playing the notes wasn't enough. It wasn't enough. He had to play the soul behind it, and the soul behind the notes. And I think that's where so many people stop. They play the exercise, and I'm like, you're not putting your soul in there. And the student I referenced earlier, where we changed the song and all of a sudden she was playing completely different, that's what came out. Every time during warm-ups during the day, all of a sudden I would see her soul kind of pop up, and I'm like, how do I get that all the time? And then it would kind of like a turtle, it would go back in the shell. And I'm like, got to figure out how to get that out of there. So
when we're hyper aware of making mistakes, we go into a fight or flight response. And I think a lot of people think a fight or flight response is part of their personality, and it's not. Like, our stress hormones are meant to protect us, not become us. And so the more we can reduce that, the more we get in touch with who we are, like you're saying,
and that's different for every person. You know, a lot of how you were raised, what happened in your household growing up. You know, a lot of that triggers those things that it's not part of your personality. That was a learned protective response. And we can kind of know we could actually go on for hours, but I've got another interview I need to do as well. We had an instance with my wife and I a couple, I'll keep it PG, don't worry, a couple of days ago where we had finished at the studio and I dropped her by, it was late. I assumed she was asleep, like she usually would be when I'm late at the studio during a camp. And I went and had an appetizer and a drink with one of the students. We just talked. And it was right next door to their, there's a restaurant right next door to the hotel. And I didn't think anything of it and started getting texts, where are you? What is happening? Her dad was a very severe alcoholic growing up. And they never knew where he was. He was at the bars and they would have to, she remembers going, getting in the car and having to go drive to find him. And the next morning I could tell there was like tension and I'm like, I don't exactly know what happened here. You know, like I didn't do anything out of the ordinary. And then she said, I don't know if it's something from growing up and not knowing where my dad was, but that really got to, and I thought, oh, that was it. Yeah, that triggered that in her, and I didn't even think about that. And I told her, I said, thanks for telling me that. Next time I will message you and let you know exactly where I am so that, but that's an instance of, that was a learned protective response that happened when she was a child. And it comes up all throughout our lives. And if we don't tackle those, we just assume, oh, that's my personality. It's like, no, actually that's hiding your personality.
Exactly.
You know?
Yeah, exactly. And I feel like that's why I want to develop this methodology of mine, Somatic Drummer, to find tools that can suss out what in our body is causing us to go into fight or flight. And so I'll be using Dr. Dattari's dissertation as a kind of theoretical framework. And I would like to have an open invitation to, as I'm developing this, I really need some consultation with students. And so anyone who's interested, please send me an email. Just The Drum Show is the title, and send it to adam@adamgust.com. And it will really help me to sort of suss out with different drummers. Send me a link to an Instagram so I can actually see you play. I remember one drummer, he had this thing where he'd play for a while and then he'd take a breath. And then you play for a while, and I was like, dude, compare yourself when you're not playing to when you're playing. And see, you know, I mean, it's like, that's so physiological. And so, yeah, I'd really like to have a method of drums, a pedagogy that can help to suss out, make us better drummers and also better people, really.
Awesome. Well, I hate to cut this short. We will do a follow-up. This is very interesting, and I think it has a lot to do with being able to become the players we want to be, which is what this is all about. So again, you can reach him at his website. If you ever have a question for me, help@stevensdrumshed.com. If you need some help with your drumming, you can follow the link. There's a 14-day free trial for the Drum Better Daily program, which is my online drum school, and drum camps. If you're interested, they will sell out. We're about half sold out, and it's been open for about a week. So the link will be in the show notes as well. So go check out Adam and what he does. We will have you back for another in-depth talk. He also has a fantastic TED Talk that you should go listen to on YouTube that was done at University of Mississippi. Props for Mississippi, because that's where I'm from.
Oh, wow, cool.
So we will see you very, very soon, Mr. Gust, and I appreciate you taking the time.
Yeah, likewise. Thank you, Stephen.
Hey, you bet.